I think AI is not a technology transformation. It's a business and organizational transformation. And it's going to drive, and it has for some companies, it'll drive new business models, new revenue streams, new markets that they've never had before.
If you're ready to unlock momentum, you're in the right place. I'm Aaron Kopel, the Momentum Locksmith, and this is where CIOs come to grow. Welcome, everyone, to the new episode of Unlocking Momentum here. I'm Aaron Kopel, your host, and I'm excited today to have a really interesting guy on our show today, super into AI and has done a lot in the Agile community over the years and just has a very interesting and storied career as well. So super excited to have Jay on the show. So Jay's real name, Gervais Johnson, but he goes by Jay. So I've got a chance to know him over the last, handful of years. And I think I knew about you a long time ago as well, just being in the Agile community. It's a small community of people that are really serious about Agile for a long time. And so I think we've sort of bumped into each other probably passing over the years, but really got to know each other a lot better over the last probably 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. So
Yeah.
But super excited to have you on the show, Jay. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, first thing, I'd love to just hear about your background and sort of, how you got into what you're doing now. So I'll turn it over to you. So tell us about you.
Okay. I started out as a nurse, and I was in the Navy. And then I went back to school and I said, well, I want to be a doctor. Then after a while, I said, I don't want to be a doctor. It takes too long. So computer science was a new thing in college. So I took that. That's back when we had Hollerith cards. I don't know if anyone remembers that stuff. And then it switched over and they got rid of them, which is fantastic because I wasn't going to stay. And then I started my career. In my career, I've worked at many companies over the years. I've worked at NASA and I've worked at General Dynamics and so forth. But one of my favorite companies I worked at was IBM. I was at IBM for 20 years. I was one of the original Watson team members, and I became a consultant and consulted and delivered a lot of solutions. And I was there when Agile first came out. We were actually using it in the late 1990s, XP and everything. And I was a software engineer. And then I moved in my career, became a project manager, program manager, Agile Scrum Master. I was an engagement manager, and then manager consultant, associate partner. Then I retired from IBM. See, you can see how I love retirement. And I went back to work. I think that lasted like 3 months. And then another company called Matrix Resources wanted me to come on and help them grow their consulting business. They were mostly a staffing business. They just recently got bought out by another bigger company. And I kind of grew that. And we focused on Agile and transformations and digital transformations, product management, product operating model. That was a big thing. Worked in Silicon Valley. I lived in San Francisco for many years and did a lot of work there and learned a lot. I learned what not to do a lot. And then I got an opportunity to leave consulting. And a friend of mine, a colleague, was working here in Indiana. And they said, CNO Financial is doing this huge Agile transformation and they want help. Do you want to come out here? And I said, yeah, because you're not going to believe this, but we were getting tired of living in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And we said, well, let's try something different. We've lived in Florida before. So we moved out here. We're kind of scary about moving out here and for various reasons. But when we got out here, everyone was very friendly and nice. We could actually afford to live out here compared to San Francisco. And then CNO Financial I liked it. I liked everyone I met there. It was a nice company. Then I got a call from someone said, hey, Lilly's looking for Agile people and everything. And they were, doing a sales job on me saying, hey, Lilly's one of the best companies in Indiana to work for. And in Indianapolis, you should, see if you can come over here. So I applied and they hired me. And I've been here now for 4 years, 3 months. 5 years will be in December of this year. And I was hired to help them do their Agile transformation, their product management implementation, if you will. We're making a lot of culture and organizational changes and training. We've had Project Brilliant come in and do the COW leadership training here and everything with different groups. So I was helping that across the organization, the enterprise. And then about 3 years ago, AI, well, a little history, AI, when I was working with AI and everything, we couldn't run it as efficiently and effectively, Watson, until GPUs came out. Now, GPUs came out, and Gen AI, OpenAI came out, and Claude and Anthropic and so forth, and it made it, feasible to do all this cool stuff in AI. So that's what we did. So I helped bring in the product strategy to develop the strategy for AI. We worked with leadership and executives to develop the strategy for the beginnings of implementing AI here and picking what we would call big bets or big wins to implement it and learn by doing it, creating a lot of models. And if you've been following Lilly, Lilly's probably on the leading edge of implementing AI. And we have partnerships with NVIDIA. We have their supercomputers here. We have partnerships with OpenAI, with Anthropic, and so forth. So the CIO here is big on AI. I mean, he doesn't generally, it's hard for him to say a sentence without having AI there. So we have, the executive sponsorship and leadership to make sure that this transformation evolves. And now we're in the agentic era of AI this year. So that's my career.
Well, it's pretty exciting. We know a lot of cutting edge stuff there. It helps that they're the largest market cap pharma company in the world, I think, right now, right? So lots of money to put towards that kind of innovation and research and all that kind of stuff. So you get to play with a lot of the different tools and figure out not just playing with them, but start to really use them for business impact, which is the important part. So great to get to know a bit about your background, sort of how you got into what you're doing now. But I'm kind of curious. I always ask this question of our guests, given where you are in your career, what we're always smarter as we go forward in our career. But what do you wish you had, piece of advice or something you wish you knew way back when you were younger in your career? So what would you give your younger self as a piece of advice?
Don't go to the next shiny object so fast. So that's been my career. I always wanted to go to where the company or the organization was doing leading technology or innovating. And IBM, we call them first of a kind. No one's ever done this before. Let's go there and figure out how to do it. And I would jump on that bandwagon. And so if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see that, right? And then I slowly recognized that I have to think about my financial well-being. And so IBM was my first company that I spent a long time there. I liked it too. It was very challenging, and there was always something new and innovative and first of a kind, helping a lot of clients. So it gave me what I wanted without jumping around to other companies. But I would have tried to find something like that earlier in my career, so I wouldn't be jumping around like that. And I probably would, have more properties, because I've had properties, and I had to sell and move and go somewhere else and everything. And there's something to say about having stability and a family and staying put for some period of time. And that comes from my background too. I was going to mention really quick, because I'm an Air Force brat. So my father was in the Air Force and everything. So we moved around every 3 years. And I just thought that's what you're supposed to do. But I've changed my mind. And the other thing I would add, and I did not learn how to do this well until recently, I would advise everyone to learn how to negotiate and fight for the best compensation you can get.
It's not a bad skill. It's sort of, it's, being an entrepreneur and running a company myself, it's, a bit of those sales skills and trying to find the win-win situations and understanding how to negotiate in good faith positively, right? So it's a good thing. Well, that's good advice, for your younger self, sort of sticking with things. And we're going to jump into sort of the theme of the podcast, which is unlocking momentum. And so, on this part of it, we really talk about, when you found yourself in a situation where, things were stuck or, looking for ways to really advance. And so kind of curious to hear your thoughts on, some of the examples you've seen about how you've sort of done that, unlocked momentum and got things moving in a good direction. So kind of curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So I'll just tell you a specific situation. And I've been doing this for, like I said, several years. But, anytime you say transformation or adoption, a lot of people don't even like the word transformation, right? There's a lot to unpack there. So that's what, my focus is, agile ways of working, agile ways of thinking. I'm sure many people that listen here understand that. Product management, product operating, all moving from project to project. That's a fairly new phenomenon. And then AI, adopting AI. And there's a whole transformation involved with AI and digital transformation, right? What I try to do is provide mentoring and coaching and training and so forth, but to provide access to the knowledge and technology and encourage people to change, right? And then scale it across the organization, right? And to do that, there's certain techniques and practices we do. First, you got to make friends and know who has the power in the organization. It's not always the person with the role name, vice president or something, but it's a combination, right? You need to get those people and create those networks for change and adoptions, right? And every company I've worked at, that's been my strategy. So what we did here is we create catalyst leaders. We have a lot of that in almost every organization I've been to. We create learning centers, COPs, all that cool stuff, change networks, all that's to drive momentum, keep enabling the change, right? And everywhere I've done that, you can measure how well you're doing or not doing, right? And then you have to come up with some action plans if you're not doing well in certain things in certain areas. And I recommend expect things not to go well sometimes, okay? And then plan accordingly to do that. So most of the time I've been successful. I'll be honest, sometimes we weren't. We've accelerated the adoption of new ways of working and thinking and agile product management and adoption of AI. And then we can measure the value and the impact. And then that's really important is you've got to have some metrics or some way of measuring what you're doing. Is it providing any positive impact and value? And do we have to pivot, right? So that's kind of what I do from a momentum point of view. And then what's interesting, I think, today, and we'll talk more about it, is that change is inevitable and continuous. You always have to be prepared to adopt something new or learn something new. This new AI era, it's like all these paradigm shifts we had. Some of us have been around long enough. We've been through many of these. Cloud.com, everything, master data management, the internet, and all that cool stuff. So this is another one, but this is a big one.
Seems like this one's bigger than a lot of those. I mean, it's on the scale of internet, right? Pre-internet to having the internet. That's a huge shift. And it feels like this one is just as big. I really like what you talked about with the metric side of it. I can imagine there's sort of two sides of that coin. There's, are we delivering value better in some way, right? There's different ways to measure that in terms of speed or magnitude or things like that. But then there's also the, how are metrics looking for the actual adoption? It's becoming pretty clear, like what the value of a lot of the AI stuff is. Like that seems pretty straightforward. You can connect the dots there, pretty obvious ways, but it's the adoption part that I think most organizations are struggling with now is really like coming up with a strategy of the why, rather than just trying a bunch of, crazy experiments in all different directions. It's really, how are we measuring the actual adoption? Are we being successful in people starting to use things in a cohesive way that we're all rowing in the same direction together versus like all kinds of random stuff going on?
Yeah, I think you got to expect that with this. So the AI strategy, and we could talk more about that, it's like threefold. One, this is my opinion based on my experience and what's going on today and talking to many others and reading and research is I think AI is not a technology transformation. It's a business and organizational transformation. And it's going to drive, and it has for some companies, it'll drive new business models, new revenue streams, new markets that they've never had before. And there's some really cool examples out there that companies have done this too. And at the same time, what happens is the very first time they come in, they're doing a lot of experimenting. I would say 23, 24, especially when Gen AI came out and open. There's a lot of experimentation going on, a lot of pilots, a lot of learning. How can we get value out of it? Right. And then 25, it was more scaling up everything and then actually determining the value and measuring it. And now in 26, it's all about agents and automating critical workflows throughout the organization, right? And I think AI is going to help us, at least it does me. And there's a good book that's been written by Barry O'Reilly called Artificial Organizations. He kind of summarizes some of our experience. But, we've all heard the term VUCA, Bonnie. So, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible, all these terms, I like them. But what they're trying to say is that there's a paradox here where you have to keep things stable, and at the same time, you're going to create instability. And it's a balancing act. Some people call that the ambidextrous organization or culture, right? I think AI is going to help us manage that world, or at least help us as a human being to deal with it, right? If you think about it, an AI is becoming a digital employee. He's not getting paid, unfortunately, she or he, but they're part of the team, right? Or part of the organization. And that's why I recommend that as we go forward, Dave Stoughton has this thing called the Canavin framework, and a lot of people study complexity science and how to adopt it and how to deal with complex domains. Anytime you deal with a human, you're dealing with a complex domain. So I think if people research that and study that more and bring it into their world, they'll be able to deal with all of this change that's happening, and it's impacting organizations and people all over, some positive and some negative.
There's been a long time fear of, is AI going to replace my job? And all of a sudden they're starting to see then maybe not the job, but certainly specific tasks are being taken where the AI starts to do, the agent starts to do some tasks that frees you up to do some different things as a person, right? Think more strategically, or how you put those pieces together. And so what have you seen with that side of things so far?
I don't want to underscore that. This is new worldwide. Okay, so everybody, to some degree, depending on where they're at in the process, is going through this change in real time and learning and adapting, right? And we can learn from each other. Change is going to happen, new business models, revenue. But I think the big speech that executives and leaders have to give to everybody to help create that psychological safety and trust is that AI is here to augment humans, not replace them. Find the boring, repetitive work to do, automate that, so we can focus on more important things that we have to figure out and do, right? And decisions. I call it the human machine workforce. So that we've got to work together. And if we work together really well, we're going to create some powerful synergies and value and outcome and cool stuff that hasn't been invented yet, right? And I think also, if we do it right, it will reduce organizational friction. So at the end of the day, if this goes like it's, predicted to go, we're going to have end-to-end autonomous value streams. Now, there's problems with that because you still have to have it self-evaluate. You have to have the human in the loop looking at certain things. If you're a regulatory company, there's certain things you can and can't do, and you have to put safeguards in there. So I think that's the message executives need to give to their employees. And I think the combination of agile ways of working and thinking and the product operating model and service management, all that stuff with AI, if you combine those things really well, create that human machine intelligence, those set of practices and tools, I think then the company will be successful, right? And it'll grow, right? And you'll create what I'm calling a company-wide future-proof human machine operating ecosystem. Doesn't that sound fancy? So now you're going to have to come up with your North Star, like your point, how you're going to measure this adoption and everything, how you're going to develop new competencies. Leadership's going to have to change how we lead. You're going to have to use AI to help you get all the information, synthesize it. You can do it much faster now and make decisions a lot faster and accelerate. It doesn't mean you make the right decision, but you'll make a decision a lot faster, right? And I think that's important. I think the other thing that's important, this stuff ain't cheap. So you're going to have an investment strategy that's tailored to your organization, right? So that you can figure out what to invest in when, right? And that should be part of your strategy and your roadmap for AI implementation, right? And it's key to look at total cost of ownership, because once you get these things built and you start running them, they're charging you for every token you do and everything. AWS and Azure, they've over the years increased their cost to run their stuff. I'm pretty sure these AI models and organizations will do the same. And especially if they're building these data centers left and right, huge. And they're going to put more and more machines there, right? So you got to really be careful there and make sure you have a proper investment strategy and a proper budget, and then measure them. You measure them in different categories like growth and innovation, maintenance and operations, compliance, strategic transformation. This what budget would be, right? So you've got to do that. But I think the real important thing after you figure all that out and the strategy is to come up with a delivery roadmap. Where do I start? How do I execute this? How do I manage it? What's my KPIs? What's my metrics? All that cool stuff you've got to lay out.
So it's kind of coming back to some of those fundamentals, right? What is this actually giving us in terms of value? How do we measure it? And to your point, I mean, it's all been fun and games so far for a lot of organizations, just trying to experiment and try some basic things like just understand how does it work and what can it do for me this week and what's the advancement next week. But to your point, when you start to scale and then you bring cost into the equation where everyone in the company starts to have access to these things and that the dollars start to add up, then we got to be more strategic and not just Wild West all over the place.
When you implement this human and machine thing, strategy and infrastructure and AI in general, you have to implement the whole stack before you get any value out of it. And the stack is like 5 levels. Yeah, 5 levels. Traditional AI, that's where we started, right? That's machine learning, some Gen AI. It's analyst stuff where I can ask the questions and goes find stuff for me and provides answers. Okay. Then we have generative AI. That's the next level. And that's where I can create some models. I can do network nodes and so forth and create the data. Now, this all depends upon how good your data is. And you can create models and they can make decisions. They can learn and then do things, not too much, but that's the next one. The next one is agentic AI. That's why, okay, now I can do actions based on some event or some trigger or some model reaction and so forth. So I can have these workflows, these end-to-end workflows, these critical workflows, start automating them and start optimizing everything, right? Which will generally, if you think about it, probably will break down some of the organizational friction and barriers, these silos that we have, right? And really moving to products and services and platforms and not really projects. You may have some projects, but more investing in those and teams continuously run and learn, right? Then after that, the agentic one, that's what we're starting now. Everyone's starting to do that because now we can with Claude and Copilot Studio and everything and start writing these agents and everything and to really talk to APIs. Now, here's the other thing. I'm guessing this is going to happen just like APIs. If you went to a big company, how many APIs do you have? Thousands. Okay, well, who's managing? Who's controlling it? Is that a CI, CMDB? I mean, okay, I think agents are going to run into the same problem. Big companies are going to have thousands of these. So I think we have to be careful. And to your point, align them to the business value and strategy. Do we really need to build this agent? What's the difference between doing an agent and a Gen AI or an ML, machine language, right? Then the next level, only 2 more, I'll be done. Productive Ops AI. So this is where I'm using it to do some predictions and everything from its learning. So it takes the data, self-trains itself and learns, and it can provide predictions and signals and it can actually go and do stuff. So it's it's advanced agentic AI. And then the last one is what they call decision AI or strategies. This is where, I don't know if we'll get there, but this is where it makes decisions, right? It learns and stuff. Now you may not want it to make those decisions, so you'll have to determine how to do the eval and have the human in the loop. But the scary part of that, if you think about it, the machines, if you set it up, it will avoid any human interaction and go off and make decisions and do stuff, right or wrong, right? So how are we going to intersect when we need to? How are we going to see what it's doing and interpret what it's doing and make sure it's doing the right thing? Because remember, these models are continuously learning and adapting. And you have to get rid of hallucinations and all that stuff. I don't know if you've heard about that stuff. So you got to worry about all those 5 layers of call it the AI stack. And so when you implement it, you've got to try to figure out how you're going to implement all 5 over time and how they're going to work together, right?
It is interesting getting to extreme of them, of agents and AI making decisions for itself, because of course, making sure it has the right motivations, which are programmed into it, helping it understand what's okay, what's not okay, where are the guardrails, where what data should it access or should not access, things like that. Because if it
Right.
starts to go outside of those things, it can get a little bit, I don't know, exciting.
Now you're going to have to think about how can we automate or orchestrate or agentify governance. I don't know if you can without human in the loop. Maybe you can. I'm sure someone will figure out how to do it, right? But that's the critical part, especially in regulated companies, right?
Obviously, AI can handle unstructured data pretty well, but if you want to manage it and put those guardrails around it, put some governance around it, you got to have a good understanding and classify things well. Otherwise, it's, again, back to a bit of the Wild West. So, yeah.
Right. Well, it's just the old thing we used to say many years ago: bad data in, bad data out, right? So we didn't use those words, but uh, but that's important because AI is really dependent on good quality, accurate data.
You referred earlier to sort of the operating model, right? There's um, the foundational aspects of how we organize our teams and people and business value streams and things like that. So that's a little bit different. But it seems like one of the biggest issues is, just like we moved from waterfall to agile ways of working, a lot of the agile ways of working started to shine a spotlight on some of the issues and problems that were apparent in waterfall, but maybe not just so obvious to everyone, right? But I think that's, that we're taking that next step now. Organizations are starting to see with AI moving so fast and starting to expose things, they're starting to see a lot of those warts a lot faster and every day they're in their face, right? Kind of curious, where do you see that going as we keep speeding up?
I see it as a positive thing, just like we did with agile transformations. It's going to identify the areas of concern and focus, right? And the areas that we need to improve, right? So data is one of them. That's going to be an obvious one, right? I think the other one will be processes and workflows. So first of all, do you have your processes and workflows documented? Do people understand how and the question generally, if I go to an insurance company, if I go to underwriting, they'll say, oh yeah, I got my processes documented. Okay, cool. So how do you work with actuary? How does that work with claims? How does that work with the policy? Oh, I don't know. That's what I talk about. The critical workflows across the company are going to touch all those things and we can automate them, but you got to know how they work and you got to define them and document them. You can't put agentic AI on something without the data and without understanding the business processes, the tasks and the activities and actions that are required.
To your point, the actions that are required across those silos, like what I'm sure you've seen this as well. Like oftentimes we have the silo documented well, but it's not the cross silo stuff because the silo, like, getting inside of IT organizations, like we've got our app dev process organized well. We've got our quality metrics and standards and how that process works, documented down to the T. But how does it all work and flow out to end to the customer? Well, that's a whole different ballgame, right? Organizations are still kind of stuck back in that waterfall siloed mentality. And so for those that haven't advanced through an agile transformation, I think they're really a few steps behind, in my opinion.
I think companies who have fully adopted agile ways of working and thinking and team structures and organization and product, organization and structure, product, platforms. So platforms is a special kind of product. It's a technical, reusable infrastructure product, right? You have internal products and you have external products. External products are stuff that the customer uses, right? And we sell internal products are stuff that we run inside the organization. They're mostly all siloed. Now with this AI world, oh, well, wait a minute. We have to look across, right? So if I'm an insurance customer, at any point in the day, I could be touching my policy. I could be creating a claim. I could be trying to look at my claim. I could do my billing. I could do, okay, well, we truly focused on that whole customer experience and everything, but it was just the UI and UX layer, right? But now if I want to go behind the scenes and automate the back end processing, as we used to call it, right? Then I need to understand how to create my agent layer and orchestration layer so I can do that properly, right? And most companies, I don't think, no one ever owned that. Okay, I have somebody that owns the CFO, owns financial management, all that stuff. Okay, I have someone over here that owns underwriting. I'm going to pick on insurance companies. Underwriting. I have someone here that owns actuary, right? I have someone over here that owns policy. I have someone over here that owns claims. No one owns how all this works together. So now we're going to have products, agent products or workflow end-to-end products. Think about it. And you'll have a product manager and a team for that.
Talk a bit more about that. Like what does leadership mean in this context? How important is that as we start to adopt more and more of these AI capabilities?
Leaders have to demonstrate their leadership behavior, right? They have to walk the talk. So in the AI world, all the executives and leaders need to be using these tools. They need to show everybody that they are proficient in using these tools and not just knowledgeable about it. They know how to do contextual prompting. The key here is they can quickly synthesize and analyze the information and data and quickly make decisions, right? So for example, when you have meetings, one of the big complaints is we have too many meetings. The next big complaint is, well, what's coming out of these meetings? What's the outcome? Where's the notes? Where's the minutes? Before you know it, you have thousands of meetings and thousands of minutes and notes that no one ever looks at. Okay, then some people say, oh no, we're gonna have action items from that. And so we're gonna put that in a note, or we're gonna put it in Jira and create a ticket or a story. Cool, right? But what's the synthesis of all that information? So I have a meeting and maybe Susan said something really great, some great idea. Did everyone take that down? Does anyone have an action item to do that? Well, you can use these tools to help you do that. You can use these tools then to help you analyze and synthesize data and information very quickly so you can make a decision. So the executives have to be the sponsor, of course, of the change and really talk about it all the time and indicate how important it is and the value we're going to get out of it and whether it's indirect or direct ROI. And then they also have to be doing it, right? They have to show by example. There's this whole thing where product managers need to be hands-on now, use these AI tools to create their prototypes and everything. So there's a convergent, okay, well, what's the UI UX person going to do? Well, they could do the same thing. Okay, well, then what's the product manager going to do? Well, they could do the same. What's the architect engineer do? Well, they could do the same. So all three people could do the same thing using these tools. Well, okay, who's going to do it? Do you need all three people? So there's conversations, discussions, and some companies are making decisions, so like LinkedIn made a decision that all their product managers be full stack engineers now, full stack product managers. And, some people are like, what? So there's changes going on with and dynamics with these roles, and we'll see how it plays out, right? But at the end of the day, if you're not using AI to do your job and do your work, you may not have one.
I'm starting to hear more and more companies say AI first. But what's the difference between that and getting to like AI natives? Like where does that head?
We've been around the block, so we've heard the same thing about other things, right? API first. It's the same kind of thinking. I think it's more about how to equip change management and motivate people and get everyone on board. It's kind of like a slogan, like AI first, right? Which is different than AI native to me. Okay, so remember when mobile devices first came out and everything, we would have a mobile iOS first, right? Because we would have to code differently for them. A long time ago, we had to code differently for the laptop versus the pad versus the phone, right? But now they've synchronized that to some extent. But it's the same thing here. AI native is more, okay, I'm going to create a product or a solution, but I'm going to create it AI first. I'm going to write it with that mindset. It's similar to Agile. So if I go in and create Scrum teams and do Scrum and everything, I come in with that mindset. I don't come in with a project management mindset. I come in with a Scrum mindset, and that's how I'm going to run the team. Or if I'm the product manager, I'm going to do certain things. I have certain best practices and so which, believe it or not, AI can create your PRDs and OKRs now. So that's where I'm seeing the difference. To me, AI native is more like the iOS native. So we're coming in there, we're building things. If you think of it as an architect, if I'm an AI architect, I'm going to always architect from that point of view.
We would see a lot of organizations that would do, waterfall upfront planning and budgeting, and then sort of, bolt on Agile on top of it in the middle. And at the end was still a waterfall release process. The project would end
Yeah,
and then we didn't know how to manage it afterward, after the release. That same kind
right.
of concept I'm seeing like in
Exactly.
this AI transformation.
Exactly. Remember, we call it scrum fall.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, and you see all combinations now, and Scrum is evolving, right? And like everything, it's been around for 30 years. It's going to have to change some, right? So everything is kind of evolving, and that's the way life is, right? Same thing with AI, but the difference is it's just evolving much faster than anything else has ever done in our lifetime. So then we have to adapt much faster, right? So there's new reference architectures out there, MPC, all this cool stuff that's being developed and adapted to and implemented. Part of that AI mindset, that native thinking, right? For example, if I have an application and some new functional or product, I should say, a new functional requirement came in to do something. The first thing I would ask myself, well, can an agent do that? Can Gen AI do that? Do I have to really code for this? Oh, well, here's even a better question. Can I do no code or low code development? Can I do vibe coding to get that solution done using AI, agentic AI or Gen AI, right? There's tools out there. Cursor, there's a lot of them. And it's getting a lot better now with GitHub and everything. So, and now they're coming out with NLP, natural language processor. I think it's going to be soon. It's be like Star Trek. You can talk to it. And that's why I keep telling myself with this convergence of AI and quantum computing and hybrid computing, that's happening here quickly. I foresee in robots, that we're going to finally get to what the Jetsons predicted in the 1960s. And that was supposed to have been 2062, the Jetsons were in, right? So maybe we'll get there. I don't know if we'll have flying cars.
Well, Elon's working on stuff all the time. Who knows?
Well, I know we'll have robots. Every house will have a robot.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get there. In those agile transformation days of, it's probably 20, 25 years where companies were evaluating, should we go that direction? Is agile the right thing? It's pretty obvious that the answer is yes in most cases, that yes, you should have started earlier than you did.
Right.
But you could, just the speed of change at that point, you could sort of get by dragging your feet a little bit and then catching up. But I think with this, it's just moving so fast. If you wait a few weeks, things just change again, right? And so you're just further and further behind the longer you wait.
That's why I think that, remember the innovation curve or the curve? So, everyone have laggards, and I think that's going to get squeezed, right? And if you're not an early adopter, or at least up there in the beginning, the chances of you surviving as a company is going to be limited.
Yeah, and you probably don't need to be bleeding edge, but you got to be on the front edge of it somewhere, right?
That's exactly. You can't wait to the laggard times.
Yeah. Laggards are just not going to be doing well at all anymore, right? So, well, this great conversation, and we've sort of covered several different topics, but I want to get to the last question here for this part of it, which is, put yourself in the mind of a CIO right now, looking at companies of different size, industries, that kind of stuff, but the general CIO that's out there trying to be successful and help their company navigate, what's the most important piece of advice or most important thing that they should be paying attention to right now, in your opinion?
Pay attention to all the technology coming in and AI. But I think the most important thing I would do if I was a CIO is quickly figure out how I can get AI going in my company. I mean, if you don't have the skills, or if you don't have someone there to help you, there's people out there, agencies and consulting firms that can help you. You need to develop that strategy, right? You need to develop a plan, implementation plan, or a roadmap, right? The other key thing is, depending on your current state, analyzing your current state and everything, you can develop a roadmap that's very iterative and get learning out there and education and training to the people. I think the other big thing is hiring. Unfortunately, with this, if you want to do this seriously, you're going to have to hire experienced people in data science and machine learning, Gen AI and stuff like that, especially if you're going to create any models. Now, not every company needs to create models, but some companies need to have specialized models. So behind Gen AI and everything else are models, right? With data and learning and thing. And then some companies like pharma and biology, biotech, hospitals, so they have to create specialized ones to do molecule development models, R&D, analyze x-rays, see if this bump is really cancer in my head, right? So those things are specialized models. So you're going to need to have specialized skill sets to help build those and create them and manage them and so forth, right? So you're going to have to look at your workforce and your competencies and skills. And you have to really be strategic and really think, because it's expensive, that's financial, right? Of how you're going to implement these things and when, right? So that's what I would do if I was a CIO. And then here's the other thing. I've heard this by several people. Well, the CIO needs to sell this to the other C-suite. I'm like, no, those days are gone. The C-suite needs to sit down, the CEO and everybody there and the board need to be aware of this, and they need to work together to come up with a strategy plan, pay for it, invest in it, and so forth. It's not just the CIO anymore. Okay, this is not, remember I said this is not a technology transformation. This is a business and organizational transformation.
It really is, and business model and trying to find the value in it as well. To your point, there's potentially some industry specific nuances that need to be understood as well. But and that's what we've been seeing for a long time is the CIO needs to really get out of the IT silo and be a collaborator, a partner, a mentor, right? But they can't do it all themselves, right? They can't be the ones that go out and do everything for the business. It's really got to be the business coming together with the CIO, because the CIO probably has a bit more, they're probably a few steps ahead, understanding this stuff and what's possible, but they don't probably understand fully the business problems, right? And so it's really getting those people together to really put the pieces together about where are we going in the future, what problems are we trying to solve, and then getting the technology solutions together. And they all need to understand it and how they can work that out. So, Jay, it's been great. We covered a lot of ground here, and I'm sure there's probably enough knowledge in your head to talk about this for several more hours. But as we get toward the end of the show here, one thing we usually do is go through some rapid fire questions to help everyone get to know you a little bit better. First one is, what is your big passion outside of work?
That should be an easy one, but I like my work a lot. So I read a lot and I just continuously do work, but I like cooking and I have some bonsai trees that I take care of.
That's cool. Yeah, bonsai trees. Makes you think of Karate Kid, of course. That's great. Well, the second rapid fire question then, if you could have a coffee with anyone alive or dead, just have a good chat with them, who would that be? Who's most interesting to you?
I kind of like Dave Snowden. He's the creator of the Canavan framework and everything. Him and I kind of have the same personality and the same interests, and we get along and we don't get along type of thing. But I've never met him in person, right? He lives in Wales. And so that'd be interesting to sit down and talk about the complexity science and all that cool stuff and just get on each other's nerves.
That'd be fun, I'm sure. Yeah. No, he's a great guy, super interesting, and I've seen a lot of videos. I did actually meet him in person once, many, many years ago, probably like 10, 15 years ago, I'm sure, at an Agile conference. Sat on one of his sessions, then got to just go up and say hi and shake his hand one time. But he's a super interesting guy for sure.
Yeah. He likes big words.
He's a smart dude. He can use those big words. So, all right. Well, our last one here, last rapid fire question is more about legacy. What's that mark you want to leave? And so I usually phrase this as, what do you want written on your tombstone? So what do you think there?
I was thinking something simple, like an elevator pitch. I was thinking, trying to be cute here at the same time, is Jay survived and thrived caring for others.
That's a good one. I like it. It's a popular theme, like people we've had on the show here. It's a lot about service to others, helping others, coaching others, making an impact. So it's a good common theme for people that have been on the show here. So that's
good.
That's a good one. I like it.
I'm in good company.
That's right. Yeah. Well, appreciate that. It's like I said, nice to get to know you a little bit better on that personal side. It's a great conversation we had, and just get to know you a little bit better here towards the end as well. As we wrap up the show here, I know people are going to find this super interesting and probably want to reach out to you and say hello and maybe pick your brain a little bit more. So what's a really good way for people to get in touch with you?
Well, probably LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot. Reach out to me there. I also have an email that I respond to. It's gervaisj69@gmail.com. That's my private one. And those right now are probably the two best ways of getting hold of me.
People will probably reach out, like I said, want to pick your brain a little bit. So that'll be easy way to get in touch. So we'll leave the LinkedIn probably in the show notes. People can find you easily and sort of go from there. So yeah, with that, thanks so much, Jay, for being on the show. It's been really informative for me, and I'm sure our listeners will find it super interesting as well. So thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Unlocking Momentum. If today's conversation sparked ideas or gave you a new way to think about leadership, check out our past episodes and resources. Don't forget to follow and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to connect with me, Aaron Kopel, the Momentum Locksmith, you'll find the link in the show notes.